What are the top 3 things kids should remember about applying abroad?
The first thing about applying abroad is do your homework. If you want to apply to a university for a particular subject, you've got to get 2 kinds of homework. The one that you will all do probably is go online and look at places. And that's good, but dig into that. And the second part that you may not do is to match yourself to the university. And that goes 2 ways. What do you want to really do? I mean, I know in India it's difficult. You have CBSE, which is streaming you into science, commerce, and arts, and you may find it difficult to think, I want to do commerce, but I want to do it with biology. Well, that option is not there. So when you think of what you enjoy doing, particularly if you're applying to the United States, that gives you that freedom, choose the subjects you enjoy and that you do well in, and try and match those interests to the place you're going. If you want to stay with commerce, you might as well do that degree. There are very good degrees in India for it. So if you're going abroad, the value added comes from that matching between what you do well and what's available outside. So that's the first tip. The second tip I have, once you've decided to match up, a lot of practice at writing that statement of purpose. Can't do it the night before. Can't get somebody else to write it if you're being interviewed, because you have to be able to answer questions on it. It has to be a combination. Write the first draft, get it improved, rewrite it. The more times you iterate your statement of purpose, the better it gets. And the third and the simplest one is be honest. What you put in your statement and what you've done has to be reflected when you get to the interview stage.
Aditi, what do you think? Any perspective on that, or anything else you'd add to that list?
Yes, once you decide what you want to do, you should start working backwards from there. And you should think that, okay, what can I do now to move towards that goal? So you need to start building your profile in such a way so as to make it attractive to the college for the specific course that you're applying to. For example, if you want to do engineering, from class 9 or 10, you start building up your profile in the science area. So you start doing internships, you go for science fairs, etc. So you start building yourself up so that when they see your CV or your resume, it's a natural fit. They don't wonder, oh, why has he applied for this subject? So they see a persistent interest in this field from your side, and that's what really will set you apart from other candidates who haven't done that.
Let's move to the CV versus resume, or either or. Could you maybe talk a little bit about, from a Cambridge perspective, because you've been on the admissions side?
Sure. So I was admissions tutor for 5 years at my university, at the college I'm at. And the CV is not something that you will have typically as something you would submit as compulsory for what's called the UCAS, the Unified Common Application System, which is the online system for all UK universities. But you can add supplementary material. So when you submit your UCAS, you also are filling in, the UCAS says which universities you want to apply to, then you make your applications online to those universities. When you're putting in your materials, you can put in a CV. And particularly if you're applying from India, it's important to put in a CV, because the more you say about yourself and the system of education you're in, the better it is for the people who are applying. So if it doesn't say CV, don't say, oh, I don't have to put it in. It's in additional materials. So yes, a CV is important, though as when we talk about resumes, they may be written differently for the American system. What the English system wants to know, your grades are number 1. They need to know what your grades are. You can also get a letter from your school which says how the CBSE compares. You know, the CBSE at the back of the forms, when you get your, this is for the teachers, when you get your marks, there's a system on the back page which says what those marks correspond to. Make a photocopy of that from the CBSE, get it stamped by your school saying this is what the CBSE system is. Cambridge has now had a 5-year relationship with CBSE. Some other universities in the UK have had longer, some have shorter. But more information you provide, which is certified by your school, that's useful. But the first thing, your CV, attach to that this information, and also put in all the other things you do. But the point I made earlier, be honest. If you don't do horse riding, don't say horse riding. Because I'll ask you a question about horse riding and you won't know. Okay? If you play gulli danda, fine. Tell them what gulli danda is. Give them information. I'm not joking. People are interested in you. That CV has to reflect you as a person, your academic qualities, and your skills.
Is there a prescribed format for a CV?
There isn't a prescribed format, but the way you would apply to any job is the same way you'd apply for a CV for school.
Because one of the things, at least in India, most people do not know or are taught to write a CV. So I'm going to pick both your brains on sort of getting some tips, because this is really, really important, because if you're applying abroad, not just for a college degree or even for jobs in India, I see hundreds of CVs come into my email inbox, and I can tell you the only one that I respond to is the one that is properly written.
Yeah.
Otherwise, they all go into the junk folder. So can you share some tips on how to write good CVs that people will notice?
Definitely. So the international CV, as opposed to the Indian one, is supposed to be just one page. It's supposed to be short and crisp, and it's not supposed to include things like your objective, your life goals, your family background. It is simply a snapshot of your most recent, most relevant, and most impressive achievements, skills, and experiences. So it's, you have to organize it in a chronological order, preferably. The reason that a badly organized CV doesn't make a good impression is because it reflects who you are. And the interviewer or the person evaluating your application will think that if you haven't put in time on your CV, then you clearly don't want this. Or they'll think you're just a disorganized person, right? So it's really important that you spend time on your CV, use the appropriate language. It needs to be crisp and concise. It needs to give the information, not just simply what you participated in, but more so the impact you had. So rather than saying 30 hours of community service at XYZ school, you want to say what you actually achieved in those 30 hours and where you were helping. Was it fundraising, teaching, administration? All of those details need to be there in a very concise manner.
May I just add one additional point? I think that's really important what Aditi says. So it's information intensive. The CV is about the information you provide. It's not a descriptive document.
And is there a certain tense they should be using to write it?
In terms of things that you've done in the past, if you've done something 3 years ago, then it's in the past tense. If it's something in the current academic year, it's in the present tense.
Okay.
And there is no future tense in the CV, okay?
Yes.
There are no intentions.
Very important. In terms of the interview process, how important it is to set up interviews? Do all of the universities in the UK ask for interviews, or is it just an Oxbridge thing?
It used to be an Oxbridge preserve, the mafia did it, but increasingly, because of visa requirements, it may be the case that other universities will require at least Skype interviews with you. This is now becoming a requirement for the visa agency in the UK. Actually, it's a nice opportunity because you actually get to engage with the people who are then hopefully going to select you. There's no disadvantage in doing an interview. So if you're not offered an interview, please take the chance. And now with this conference is on digital technologies and Digital India, we have access to Skype, and Skype connections are useful. And just like your CV, you've got to practice for that interview in the same way, so that actually your interview experience reflects the information in your CV, but in a more detailed fashion.
Any particular types of questions people ask?
Yes, so the Oxbridge interview, of course, Dr. Shelja can explain better, but as far as the US ones are concerned, it's mainly the alumni that are asked to interview the candidates. And the interview is not supposed to be technical, it's more so based on finding out who you are as a person and to check that you are actually who you say you are in the application, right? So a lot of them are conducted as casual conversations, either in coffee shops or on the phone or maybe even Skype. But essentially they want to know who you are, why you're interested in applying to their college, and what excites you academically. These are the three main points that you need to brush up if you're scheduled for a US interview. And of course, during the interview, they look for certain characteristics such as passion, energy, initiative, diligence, definitely, and the ability to adapt to different environments and accept diversity. Because diversity is it's very valued in the States.
Any thoughts from your perspective?
I agree with the points that Aditi makes. I think she's absolutely correct. You will find, however, with each university which has an interview system, whether it's in the US or the UK, they will provide information on their website. They will provide usually videos of either stylized interviews where you can see the nature of the engagement. They're really useful to tune into for everything, including the accent of the interviewer. I mean, these are difficult things to do on the first time if you don't quite understand the interviewer. So please make use of that digital technology which you will have. As Aditi says, it may be an alumni member in the case of the US. And so again, reading up about the university in addition to your CV is a pretty good thing to do.
What are these sorts of questions, Shailaja, people will ask?
Okay, so the kind of questions that Aditi says are mostly to identify whether what you've said in your CV is an accurate reflection of you. They might want to push you beyond your current course content. So, for example, the CBSE course is very specific. It's a good course, but it is teaching to the test, and you learn the stuff in the book. But if you want to do a course, you need to have read more widely. So very often you'll be asked the question, what else have you read beyond your course? And the answer is not, and I repeat, not, I did not have time to read. Okay? It might be what you're thinking now, but as Aditi says, you're planning for the next 2 years. Make the time in the summer holidays to identify 1 or 2 books or even popular magazine, BrainGain magazine, where you read some material and are able to converse about it.
Anything you'd add on the interview questions?
For the interviews, you need to know your application inside out. Everything you've said there, everything you've written in your essays can be questioned. Everything that's in your resumes can be questioned. So you need to go through your application materials in advance and prepare your points in advance. Because while you're in that interview, you might lose your presence of mind and you might forget to say important things that you would like to say. So you need to prepare for that in advance, go through your applications and make sure that what you say matches what's in your applications.